The accusation didn't happen behind a closed door. It didn't happen in a private meeting or over a quiet phone call. It happened in the middle of our Tuesday morning stand-up, with 22 people watching. Nicole Vance from HR was standing right beside my manager, Kevin, when she said it. Her voice was calm, practiced, the way someone sounds when they've rehearsed a line in front of a mirror. "We've reviewed the claim Martha submitted," she said, folding her arms loosely across her chest. "And it's not accurate." The room shifted. I felt the change before I saw it, a tightening in the air, the way everyone's breathing seemed to slow at the same moment. Then Nicole looked directly at me. Not past me. At me. "So let's be clear," she added, her voice steady and final. "No one here falsified payroll records." 22 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I hadn't opened my mouth. I hadn't said a single word since the stand-up began. And they had already decided. I felt my pulse pound in my ears. The heat crawled up the back of my neck, slow and burning, the way it does when you know everyone in the room is watching you fall apart. Except I wasn't falling apart. My hands stayed flat on the table. My back stayed straight in my chair. My face stayed calm, not because I wasn't angry. I was. But I had learned a long time ago that showing anger in a room full of people who have already made up their minds only gives them exactly what they want. Nicole was watching me, waiting. I think she expected tears, or stammering, or some kind of denial that she could then calmly dismantle in front of everyone. The kind of moment that makes a person look guilty even when they aren't. I gave her none of it. I kept my eyes on her, steady and still, and I said nothing at all. Nicole smiled. It was small, barely there, really. A tight press of her lips, like she was pleased with the way things were going. Kevin stood beside her, nodding slightly, his expression carefully neutral in the way people look when they've been told exactly what to say and are sticking to the script. The smile was the part that got under my skin the most. Not because it was cruel. Because it was confident. Nicole believed this was over. She believed that the moment she'd said those words out loud, in front of the whole team, the matter was settled. The claim was dismissed. The story was closed. I was the person who had raised a concern and been told, publicly, that she was wrong. That was supposed to be the end of it. I watched her smile and felt something settle in my chest. Not panic, not defeat, but something colder. Sharper. The kind of feeling you get when you realize that the person across from you has no idea what's about to happen. I swallowed once. Then I nodded, just a single, quiet nod, and sat back in my chair. Let them read it however they wanted. Embarrassment. Acceptance. Defeat. It didn't matter. My name is Martha Caldwell. I had worked at Pinnacle Group for 6 years. 6 years of processing payroll, of tracking hours, of making sure every number that left our system was exactly right. And they had just stood up in front of everyone I worked with and called me a liar. What Nicole didn't know, what Kevin didn't know, and what none of the 22 people in that room understood yet, was that I had every single piece of evidence that proved I wasn't. Not because I'd planned for this moment, but because doing my job well meant I kept records. And payroll day was in exactly 3 days. To understand what happened in that stand-up, you have to go back about 5 weeks. That's when I first noticed the discrepancy. It wasn't huge, not at first. I was running my weekly hours reconciliation, the same task I'd done every Thursday for the better part of 3 years. Cross-referencing approved timesheets against what had actually been entered into the payroll system. It was routine. Boring, even. But that Thursday, something didn't line up. An employee named Todd Barker had logged 40 hours for the week. His approved timesheet, signed off by his supervisor, showed 36. 4 hours had appeared from nowhere. I flagged it immediately. Sent an email to Kevin, copied Nicole, and attached both documents side by side. Simple. Clean. The kind of thing that should have been fixed in an afternoon. Nobody responded for 2 days. When Kevin finally replied, his message was short. Thanks for flagging. Nicole is handling this. No action needed on your end. That was it. No explanation. No correction. No updated timesheet. I waited another day, then checked the system again. The hours hadn't changed. Todd's record still showed 40. But something else had changed, something small, something that most people wouldn't have noticed if they weren't looking. The approval timestamp on his timesheet had been updated. The original approval had been logged on a Monday at 9:14 a.m. Now it showed Wednesday at 2:47 p.m. Someone had gone back into the system and changed the record. Not the hours themselves. The timestamp of the approval. It was subtle. Quiet. The kind of edit that could easily be written off as a system glitch if nobody was paying close attention. But I was paying close attention. And I had already saved the original export before the change was made. I kept everything. Every email. Every timesheet export. Every system notification. I saved them the way I always did, organized by date, labeled clearly, backed up to my personal folder. Not because I suspected anything at first. That was simply how I worked. When you process payroll for a company with over 200 employees, you learn fast that it should be fine is never a good enough answer. Numbers have to be exact, or people don't get paid correctly. And when people don't get paid correctly, the company doesn't just have a problem, it has a liability. So I had a habit. Every time I made a change, I documented it. Every time someone else made a change, I documented that too. Timestamps. Email chains. Export files with version histories. By the time Nicole stood up in that stand-up and called me a liar, I had 11 weeks of clean, unedited records that told a very different story than the one she was telling. The warning came from the last person I expected. Her name was Diane Marsh, a quiet woman who sat 3 desks away from me and worked in accounts receivable. We didn't talk much during the day, but we sometimes ate lunch together in the break room. On the Monday before the stand-up, I mentioned to her that I'd flagged the payroll issue and hadn't heard back. Diane's face changed when I said it. She set down her fork and looked at me, really looked, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Martha," she said, keeping her voice low. "Be careful with this." "What do you mean?" "HR doesn't like being questioned," she said. "Especially not publicly. And especially not when the numbers are involved." She didn't say anything else about it. She changed the subject, and we talked about nothing important for the rest of lunch. But I remembered her face. The way her eyes had narrowed, just slightly, when I mentioned Nicole's name. Diane knew something. And she'd just tried to warn me. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the stand-up invitation itself. The meeting was a routine Tuesday sync, 20 minutes, quick updates, nothing unusual. Except when the invite came through on Monday afternoon, 2 names had been added to the attendee list that were never normally there. Nicole Vance. And someone from corporate compliance named Arthur Reyes, who I'd only ever seen in company-wide emails. I noticed it but didn't think much of it at the time. People joined meetings for all kinds of reasons. But sitting there now, replaying it in my mind, I understood. The invite had been set up on purpose. The extra attendees were there on purpose. The timing, a Tuesday morning, when the whole team was already gathered, was on purpose. This wasn't a stand-up. It was a setup. And I had walked right into it. Nicole's words in that meeting weren't just an accusation. They were a frame. Clarifying misinformation, Kevin called it afterward, in a follow-up email to the team. As if someone had been spreading rumors and HR had simply stepped in to set the record straight. But that's not what happened. What happened was that I had raised a legitimate concern through the proper channels, an email with documentation attached, and instead of investigating it quietly, they had chosen to address it in front of the entire team. Not to fix the problem. To make an example. The message was clear, even if nobody said it out loud. This is what happens when you question us. I understood that. I understood it completely. And I also understood something Nicole hadn't considered. Intimidation works best when the person you're intimidating doesn't have proof. I had proof. 11 weeks of it. After the stand-up, I sat at my desk for a long time without moving. The office hummed around me, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the quiet murmur of people pretending everything was normal. A few people glanced my way as they walked past. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious. 1 or 2 looked away quickly, Like they didn't want to be seen noticing me at all. I could have argued. I could have gone straight to Kevin's office and laid out every document I had. I could have called corporate. I could have made noise. Every instinct I had was pulling me toward that, toward defending myself loudly, immediately, in a way that would force everyone to listen. But I stopped. I thought about what Diane had said. I thought about how Nicole had smiled. And then I thought about something else entirely. Payroll posts on Friday. In 3 days, the numbers would speak for themselves. All I had to do was wait. I pulled up the payroll calendar on my screen and stared at it. Friday, 6 a.m. That was when the automated system would process the week's pay and push everything through to employee accounts. Every hour, every adjustment, every change that had been made to the records over the past several weeks, including the ones that shouldn't have been made at all. The system didn't care about politics. It didn't care about what Nicole had said in the stand-up or how Kevin had worded his follow-up email. It simply took the numbers that were in the database and turned them into deposits. And right now, those numbers were wrong. Not because of me. Because someone had changed them. I knew what was in the system. I knew what should have been there. And I knew that on Friday morning, when those numbers posted to real bank accounts and real pay stubs, anyone who looked closely enough would see exactly the same thing I had seen 5 weeks ago. The discrepancy wasn't going to go away. It was going to get louder. Wednesday and Thursday passed in silence. Not the comfortable kind, the tight, held breath kind that settles over an office when everyone knows something is wrong but nobody wants to be the first to say it. Nicole didn't follow up on the accusation. Kevin didn't send another email. Nobody pulled me aside to ask how I was doing or whether I wanted to talk about it. The stand-up on Wednesday was shorter than usual. People spoke quickly, kept their updates brief, and left the room without the usual small talk. I did the same. I answered questions when they were asked. I finished my work. I kept my head down and my expression neutral. I didn't bring up the payroll issue again. I didn't need to. The silence wasn't weakness. It was patience. And patience, when you know exactly what's coming, is the most powerful thing in the room. Friday morning, I woke up early. Earlier than I needed to. I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet of my apartment. Then I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. The deposit was there, posted at 6:02 a.m., the way it always was. I looked at the number for a long moment. Then I put my phone down and got out of bed. I didn't need to check it again. I already knew what was in there, and more importantly, I already knew what was in everyone else's. I'd run the numbers myself the night before, not from the live system, but from my own saved exports, the ones I'd been keeping for weeks. I knew exactly what had posted. I knew exactly where it didn't match what it should have been. And I knew that by the time the sun was fully up, other people were going to start knowing it too. I made coffee. I took my time getting ready. There was no rush. The truth had already arrived. The first message came in at 8:23 a.m. It was from a woman named Priya Adesanya, who worked 2 floors above me in project management. We weren't close. We'd spoken maybe a handful of times over the years. But her message was short and direct. Hey Martha, quick question. Did your pay look right this week? Mine seems off. I read it twice, then set my phone face down on my desk. It had started. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that what was about to happen didn't need me to push it. Priya wasn't the only one who would notice. The discrepancy affected more than one person, more than one pay stub, more than one account. I had seen it in the exports. I had mapped it out. And now, on a Friday morning, with real money in real accounts telling a story that no one in HR had been able to stop, the truth was doing exactly what I had waited for it to do. By 10 a.m., I had received 4 more messages. Different people. Different departments. All saying variations of the same thing. Something doesn't add up. One of them, a man named Oscar Webb from Finance, had already started cross-referencing his pay stub against his approved timesheet. He sent me a screenshot with a single line underneath. These don't match. At all. I looked at his numbers. He was right. They didn't match. And the reason they didn't match was the same reason Todd Barker's numbers hadn't matched 5 weeks ago. Someone had adjusted the records after the approvals were signed. The pattern I had flagged wasn't a one-time error. It wasn't a glitch. It was happening across multiple employees, across multiple pay periods. And now that Payroll had posted, everyone with a bank account and a pay stub could see it too. At 11:14 a.m., an alert popped up on my screen. It was an automated notification from the payroll system itself, the kind that generates when certain internal checks flag an irregularity. I had seen these before, but only a few times in 6 years. They were rare. They meant the system had caught something it wasn't supposed to catch. I read through the alert carefully. It listed 3 employee records where the posted hours did not match the most recent approved timesheets. Todd Barker's name was at the top. 2 others followed. The alert had been sent automatically to the payroll department, to compliance, and, because of how the system was configured, directly to Arthur Reyes, the man from corporate compliance who had been in the stand-up on Tuesday. The system had just done, in one automated notification, what I had been trying to do for 5 weeks. It had made the discrepancy official. At 12:47 p.m., a calendar invite dropped into my inbox. Subject line, Quick Sync, Payroll Clarification. Attendees, Nicole Vance, Kevin, Arthur Reyes, and me. Time, 2 p.m. 45 minutes from now. I read the invite and almost smiled. Quick Sync. The same language they used on Tuesday, when they had stood in front of the whole team and told me I was wrong. Except the tone of this invite was different. I could feel it in the way it was worded, careful, almost apologetic, the way people write when they know they're walking onto thin ice. There was no mention of clarifying misinformation this time. No confident language. No finality. Just a plain, neutral subject line and a time that felt rushed, as if someone had thrown it together in a hurry, trying to get ahead of something that was already moving faster than they could. The 2 p.m. meeting was nothing like the Tuesday stand-up. Nicole sat in the corner of the small conference room, her arms folded, her eyes on the table. Kevin sat beside her, scrolling through something on his phone with an expression that looked less like focus and more like controlled panic. Arthur Reyes sat at the head of the table, calm, quiet, but paying attention to everything. The energy in the room had completely changed. On Tuesday, Nicole had walked in with authority. She had stood beside Kevin and spoken clearly and firmly, and the room had listened. Now she looked like someone trying to remember her lines in a play that had gone off script. Nobody accused me of anything. Nobody called my claim inaccurate. Nobody smiled. Arthur spoke first. "Martha, thank you for coming in on short notice," he said, in the even, careful tone of someone who was choosing every word deliberately. "We'd like to go over a few things." By 3:30 p.m., the request had come down from above Kevin's level. Arthur had made a phone call during the meeting, stepped out briefly, came back with a different expression on his face, and informed us that leadership wanted full documentation of every payroll adjustment made in the last 8 weeks. All of it. Every change, every approval, every timestamp. I nodded and said, simply, "I have all of that." The room went very still. Nicole looked up from the table for the first time. I met her eyes, held them for a second, and then turned back to Arthur. "I've been keeping records since the first discrepancy," I said. "Time-stamped exports. Email chains. Everything." I didn't say it with pride or satisfaction. I said it the way I would have said it to anyone asking about my workflow, as a fact. Arthur nodded slowly. "We'll need copies of everything you have," he said. "By end of day." "Already done," I replied. The audit took 4 business days. During that time, I watched the information move through the company like water finding cracks in a wall. Arthur's team pulled the records I had provided and compared them against the live system. The results were exactly what my exports had shown. The approved hours did not match what had been entered. In multiple cases, the timestamps on the approvals had been altered after the fact. And in every single case, the changes had been made by the same user account. Nicole's. The approvals didn't match the adjustments. The adjustments didn't match the pay stubs. And the timestamps, the ones someone had quietly rewritten to cover the trail, didn't match the original system logs that Arthur's team recovered from the backup servers. Someone had altered records. Not once. Not accidentally. Deliberately, repeatedly, over a period of weeks. And the digital fingerprints were everywhere. Nicole was placed on administrative leave on a Thursday afternoon. No announcement was made to the wider team, not officially. But word moved the way it always does in an office that size. Through whispers, through the sudden absence of a name in meeting invites, through the way people's eyes shifted when someone mentioned HR. Diane Marsh found me in the break room that evening, after most people had gone home. She sat down across from me with a cup of tea and looked at me for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "I told you to be careful." "You did," I said. "But you didn't tell me to stop." She smiled, small, tired, but real. "No," she admitted. "I didn't." We sat together in the quiet of the empty room, and for the first time since the stand-up, I let myself exhale. The thing that had been sitting in my chest for weeks, that cold, sharp weight, had finally started to lift. The apology came on a Monday, 5 days after Nicole's leave began. It wasn't from Nicole. It was from Kevin, and it wasn't exactly an apology, more of a careful, indirect acknowledgement wrapped in corporate language. He sent me an email that said the company was reviewing its internal processes and wanted to thank me for my contributions to data integrity. No mention of the stand-up. No mention of the accusation. No admission that they had publicly called me a liar in front of the entire team. I read the email twice, then closed it without replying. I didn't need the apology. I didn't need the acknowledgement, either, not from him. What I needed, and what I already had, was something much more valuable than words on a screen. I had my record. Clean. Untouched. 6 years of work that spoke for itself. And I had already begun doing something Kevin's email could never have prepared him for. I had started talking to other companies 3 weeks before the audit ended. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted to escape. But because I had spent 6 years in a place that made me feel like the ground beneath me was always slightly unsteady, and I was tired of that feeling. A recruiter I'd connected with months earlier had reached out about a senior payroll analyst role at a firm called Oak Ridge Solutions. The role was bigger, the pay was better, and, most importantly, the person who would be my direct manager had a reputation for the kind of leadership that actually listened. I went through 2 rounds of interviews. I was offered the position on a Wednesday. I accepted on Thursday. I gave my notice to Kevin on Friday morning, in person, with a calm and polite email to follow. He looked surprised. Then he looked like a man who understood, too late, exactly what he was about to lose. 3 months into my new role at Oak Ridge, I sat at my desk on a quiet Friday afternoon, finishing up a reconciliation report. The kind of work I'd always been good at, careful, precise, numbers that had to be exactly right. My new manager, a woman named Elaine Kowalski, stopped by my desk on her way out. "Great work this week, Martha," she said, glancing at my screen. "The Q3 numbers look clean." "They are," I said. And they were. I thought about that Tuesday morning sometimes. The stand-up, the accusations, Nicole's confident smile, the way 22 people had looked at me like I was someone to pity. I thought about the 3 days of silence I'd chosen instead of the argument I could have made. I thought about payroll day, and the way the truth had posted itself into existence without me saying a word. I never raised my voice. I never confronted anyone. I never asked for a public correction or a formal apology. I didn't need any of it. Because silence isn't weakness when the truth is documented. It isn't patience for patience's sake. It's something sharper than that. It's knowing exactly when to let the numbers do the talking, and trusting them to say everything you never had to.